Reading use of English is part of the C2 proficiency exam that a lot of students and candidates find difficult, and let's be honest, it is pretty challenging. But there are some things that you can do outside of just practicing exam tasks that can make things a lot easier come the day of the exam. In this video, I'm going to explain exactly what you're going to be tested on in the different parts of the reading use of English exam, and also suggest some practical things that you can do to make things maybe not easy, but a whole lot easier. So in the first episode of this series, we took a general overview of what is the C2 Proficiency exam. So if you haven't seen that video yet, I suggest that you take a look at it just so you're familiar with exactly what we're talking about here. I'll also put a link in the description below. But in this video, what we're going to do is take a more in-depth look at the reading and use of English part, and specifically the first 4 tasks that you have to do. These focus more on grammar and vocabulary. So let's kick things off with reading and use of English part 1. So in reading and use of English part 1, you get a text. It's about 200 words long and there are 8 gaps. This is a multiple choice task, so to complete the text you need to choose one word from 4 possible options. For each one you get right, you get 1 point. So there are a maximum of 8 points available for this task. One thing that's really important though is to make sure you put something even if you're not sure, because you won't be given a negative score if you get an answer wrong. In part 1, you're going to be tested on a few things, mainly idioms and fixed phrases, but also phrasal verbs and the precise meaning of similar words. That's really important. And you'll also be tested on collocations, so words that commonly fit together in English, and also complementation. This is how one part of a sentence complements or connects to another part. So to improve your skills for this part of the exam, obviously you're going to have to do a lot of reading and use of English part 1 tasks. But another thing that you can do is to play the role of the examiner. Now, what do I mean by that? Okay, so as you're reading a text, go through it and identify and highlight things like phrasal verbs, fixed phrases, idioms, or collocations that you think would be difficult for someone else to identify within that text. What you're doing there is becoming familiar with the types of things that you'll be tested on. Another thing that you can do is to use a dictionary, but not just to find the meaning. Also use it to look at synonyms and compare the meaning of similar words. That way again, you're going to become familiar with not just one word that can be used to describe something, but a similar word and the subtle differences in the meaning. So part 2 is quite similar to part 1. You have another text that is about 200 words long, and this text has 8 gaps in it. But the difference is, instead of it being multiple choice and you having to choose from one of 4 options to complete the gap, here you need to think of the word that fits correctly in the gap. So again, there are 8 possible marks, 1 mark for each correct answer. In part 2, you're going to be tested on vocabulary, so you need to think of things like phrasal verbs, linkers, and also the words that are used to make up fixed phrases or fixed expressions. But you're also going to be tested on grammar words, so here you need to think of things like articles, auxiliary verbs, prepositions, and pronouns. Now, unfortunately, there's no cheat code or substitute for actually reading in English. And the more you read in English, the more familiar you're going to be with the different word combinations and structures that you're going to be tested on in this part of the exam. But again, what I would suggest is to play the role of the examiner. As you're reading, go through the text and create gaps for as if you were testing someone else. You can go through and highlight linkers, auxiliaries, prepositions, or parts that make up phrasal verbs, and Select the words that you think would make the text challenging for someone else to complete if they were removed from the text. So part 3 is about word formation, and in this part of the exam you have another text. It's probably a little bit shorter than the ones that you get in parts 1 and 2, but there are still 8 gaps. The difference here is that to the side of the text you're going to see stem words, and these stem words must be used to form the words that complete the gap. So for example, a stem word that you might be given is motive, and from this word you need to create the word motivational, which is the correct word that goes in the gap. So part 3 is testing you on vocabulary again, but this is your knowledge of different word forms. So think of verbs, nouns, adjectives and adverbs. Also need to think of prefixes and suffixes, both positive and negative ones, and also compound words. Like parts 1 and part 2, is 1 point for each correct answer, so you can score a total of 8 points here. Reading books and articles, listening to podcasts, watching films and TV series in English are all things that are going to help you to build up your vocabulary, but something that you can do specifically to improve your knowledge of word formation is to record word marks. So you can take a stem word, write it in a circle, and around the outside you can add as many words as possible that can be formed from this stem word. To help you to do this, you can use the Cambridge Dictionary. If you search for a word and scroll down to the bottom, you'll find a list of the other words that can be formed from the stem word, and you can use this to add to your word map. The official name for part 4 is keyword transformations, but most students refer to this as sentence transformation because you're given one sentence, a first sentence, followed by a keyword and then a second sentence which has a gap. Your task is to use the keyword along with some other words to complete the second sentence so it has a similar meaning to the first sentence. And to do this, you need to use between 3 and 8 words. Here you're being tested on using the correct grammar and vocabulary, but also your ability to recognize common expressions in English. Here there are 6 questions in total, and each one is worth 2 marks, so you can score up to 12 points here. Remember, always put something, because even if you don't get the answer fully correct, you might still get 1 point. So a key element of doing well on part 4 is your ability to paraphrase and say the same thing in a different way. And a really useful tool for helping you to practice and develop your ability to do this is something called the Power Thesaurus. No, it's not a dinosaur. A regular thesaurus is basically a dictionary of synonyms, and it will give you alternatives to single words. The Power Thesaurus, however, can give you alternatives to short phrases and expressions. So this is really useful in your preparation for part 4. Okay guys, I hope you found this video useful. If you did, please give it a like, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next episode in the series. Also, if you've got any comments, please leave them below. I'll also leave the links to any resources and websites that I mentioned in the video in the description. And if you want to practice any reading and use of English tasks, we've got some on the Floquentic website. So head over there and take a look. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next episode.